So hello, everyone. My name is Christina, and it is really with great pleasure that I welcome you here today. To give a little bit of context to those who don't know us, the Control Society is this international scientific organization founded in 1978, I think, dedicated to promoting the exchange of knowledge in the field of new therapy systems. So the idea is to create this inclusive scientific community that advances research, technology, education, and networking in the field of delivery science worldwide. And there's also many regional chapters affiliated with the global CRS. I'm representing specifically today the Young Scientists Committee belonging to the CRS local chapter of Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. So this is here now, you can see the current makeup of our formidable team. And you are watching our very first quarterly webinar in a series that aims to give a spotlight to early career scientists in our field, but also to discuss specific topics as they relate to what it's like to do research in these three countries from a variety of different perspectives. So you can reach out to us via email, connect through LinkedIn, or check out the local chapter's website to stay updated on upcoming events and activities. We also hope, of course, to see you in person, at least some of you, at the 30th annual meeting of our parent CRS local chapter, which will take place in early March 2026 in Saarbrücken, Germany. So now, without further ado, I leave you all in the excellent hands of Neslihan, who is our inaugural moderator.
Thank you, Christina. And welcome from my side. Thank you for joining for today's webinar. I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Dr. Gregor Bordon. Dr. Gregor Bordon leads Eldian Biomed, a biotech venture spinning out from the University of Bern, developing Cloud-D1, a disease-modifying osteoarthritis therapy built on an internal platform tech. Previously, he worked in venture capital with M Ventures as a fellow in biotech investments and founded PharmaCamp, a Swiss NGO fostering innovation at the interface of science and industry. He has secured over 1 million Swiss francs in non-dilutive funding and is passionate about translating academic research and discoveries into impactful therapies. In today's talk, from PhD student to early stage biotech entrepreneur, Gregor will share his personal journey, key lessons, insights on translating academic research into real-world therapies. Gregor, we're really happy to have you here. Looking forward to your insights, and the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Nestle. Let me share now the screen. Hopefully it works out. Okay. It'd be useful to have a thumbs up when it actually appears. Do you guys see it? Awesome. Okay. Thanks a lot for the intro. I'm really happy to be here. I'll talk about my path from academia to startup as Nestle started, what it means to be an entrepreneur in biotech, and my playbook on how to do it. So I did my PhD at the University of Bern in Professor Paolo Luciani's group in drug delivery systems. And today I'm on the path of founding the company, the environment. I try to make this presentation as practical as possible so that you can take my ideas and lessons learned and directly implement it to your strategy for making a spin-off. And of course, it would take much longer to delve into each specific thing, but hopefully it will be useful for you still. So I'm going to stop first on what is entrepreneurship. I'd really like to hear your thought, what it means, and hear your ideas. I'll try to speak that what it takes to do it. What do we need to make a startup work? I'll speak about different stages of a startup financing and outline the general path that majority of spin-offs in biotech, at least in Switzerland, take. I'll also outline at which stage you can take how much money and give some suggestions where to start and where I started. Next, I'll speak about my startup and my path, tell you a bit about what I do, and finally touch on a little bit about the topics on how to get funded, what is required and studied by investors, as well as what is the venture process like. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What is entrepreneurship to you? It's an important question that can help you define why and if you want to do it, and if this path is the right for you. So maybe you can write in the chat or just raise an arm and say it. I don't see arms or the chat, so it'd be useful if somebody reads it. I would be really appreciative if I get at least 2 ideas what entrepreneurship is. Okay, I have the chat. Risk. Yes, it is risk, that's for sure. And the people that invest in it, in Slovene, it's called risky capital. And in English, it's venture capital. It's creating value. I think that's very important. And I totally agree with it. We have 2, and I'm happy with the number. If there's anybody else, please shoot in the chat. Tangible solution. Yes, indeed. I think that those are very good options to name. So looking what other figures out there say about it ranges widely. But if we take Zuckerberg, he said that it's to him about creating change, not just companies. Peter Thiel, who's from Austria, so it falls in the umbrella of CRS, let's call it. He talks about building a different future and startup being the largest group of people that you can convince to make it happen. And then the 2 legendary investors, Ben Horowitz, talks about a darker aspect of the struggle. And his Paul Mark Andreessen says that it's sometimes romanticized and it can be brutally hard. And those can be true. My view is that it is hard, but it's something that allows you as a scientist to create the highest impact possible. And if you like doing hard things and taking hard challenges on to make an outsized impact, it might be for you. And to me, the definition is really composed of the 3 parts. First is a career or activity that starts with innovation. In biotech, it would be this would be your or your group's benchmark. It's hard to get around a wet lab in our industry, and it's where the magic happens. So then it's about the value creation, which was also pointed out in the chat. We need to bring the innovation, what was basically created in the lab, to the position where it will also create value. So just making something in your lab and not bringing it to the user, customer, or patient will not create value in itself. So in our world, this means de-risking your product enough so that it can be injected in patients and bringing it to as many patients in need as possible in order for them to have a better life. And then the third part, which is also very important, is about monetization. So after you create value, you should be compensated for it. So it's not only to keep your motivation going to do more things and to give you resources to do more things, but it's also for you to be repaid for what you've done and to repay all the people that believed in you and in your venture from the beginning. So through supporting you through investments and helping you to sell these medicines and create value. Okay, so we've done that. We covered what is entrepreneurship. Now let's touch on what it takes to start a company. So I'd again like to hear your ideas to kind of fill the room, to think, to hear what is in your mind important to start a company. Any ideas in the chat? Again, 2 would be nice. Money, yes. Money is important and you need a lot of it, but it's not the most important thing. A good team, a product, yes, those are all very important parts. Important parts, but they're not more solved. So it can be, in our field, medical needs. So validated ones, KOLs, generally don't have a problem with finding payers. Here I'll speak about 2 examples. So they're randomly selected. First one, let's say osteoarthritis. In this first problem, there are, let's say, no disease-modifying treatments available, and even pain is tough to manage. The second example here is, let's say, microRNA has to be delivered in the brain through a hour-long procedure that's expensive and burdensome for the patient in healthcare systems, for example, for Huntington disease. And this is, let's say, a definition of a problem. Then what else do we need is a solution. So this is your work in the lab. It's the innovation that I spoke about earlier. You can think of it for the first example, let's say, designing a drug that will stop the matrix metalloproteinase production and the degradation of the joint. Or you could think of the second example, let's say designing a gene delivery vehicle that is non-viral, that will penetrate selectively through your blood-brain barrier. Of course, easier said than done, but this is what our PhDs and postdocs are all about. And then the third, we need a business model. So how will this thing make money? So there are, let's say, two most typical ways that biotechs make money. So one is the asset path, where basically you de-risk a clinical asset or multiple of them, and then either sell the company or out-license the asset to a larger corporate once it's de-risked and attractive enough. And the second one you might consider as a platform company, where you will develop a platform first that can make multiple. There you will probably develop one asset to showcase the platform, and then partner follow-on assets or out-license them to get early cash. And you can still sell the whole company at the end of the day. And then let's say you have a business model, then what you need is a go-to-market strategy, which is a fancy way of saying a more detailed plan how we are going to make the company work. So how are we going to get to the market or to an exit? So for the sake of brevity here, I added an example of only the platform play. So let's say you start with one indication where your technology has the most scientific sense. Clinicians and patients are calling for new drugs. There aren't many competitors ahead of you, and you can potentially get some help from the regulators for speed. So let's say you select some CNS disorder like Huntington, where you get the orphan or fast track designation by FDA or similar, and you can go fast to patients. You demonstrate your technology by publishing promising breakthrough data, and you get with that validity in front of partners that could then give you money to load their other payload like siRNA or antisense oligonucleotide into your payload. Then with this published data, successful projects, you can attract more KOLs to want to recruit patients fast for you and promote your technology. And then with a developed platform toolkit, you adapt fast the technology for every payload, creating a flywheel. And this then allows you to sell licenses for upfront payments, milestones, royalties, while developing your high impact first asset internally until exit. So this would be in general part of your business plan, all of these things. And of course, you need a good market. So if you're an early stage academic spin-off, you probably will not get funded easily for creating a me-too drug, something that will marginally improve therapy for some specific therapeutic area. You should be focusing on either targeting a new target that you validated or being much better than currently first-in-class therapy. So those are called first-in-class versus best-in-class. Those two can attract investors. If you're just a me-too drug for something that is marginally important, it's very hard to bring that to the market for academics. Okay, so what help do we need from the ecosystem to start a company, and how do we make it happen? So we thought a little bit more for Switzerland, but there are also some German parallels, let's say. So ZIM is, I think, similar to InnoSwiss, I believe, and you can translate to your institutions. So when you start as a PhD student, you're working in a group with professors' grants and funding, and sometimes you have freedom to do what you want, sometimes less. And there are cases where you're put on a running project with a lot of data already generated by your predecessors, and you're fulfilling a professor's wish of doing a startup. But here I am not talking about those cases primarily. Let's say in this case, you developed a new technology drug and have promising in vitro data. Then in the best case scenario, you will also be given funding to do an animal proof of concept within a group, still without the need to apply for further funding. But that's not always the case. So in my case, it wasn't the case. So then you need to basically get money yourself to do that. In such cases, you will need to get your own grant to fund the animal proof of concept. And in Switzerland, let's say there are 3 key grants that you can look for. So the InnoSwiss without implementation partner is probably the best one that you can go for. There's Bridge Proof of Concept and Venture Fellowship for University of Bern, or similar ones that are in other universities, such as Pioneer Fellowship at ETH. So this will give you funds mainly for 1 year to understand your market, think about your team setup, and most importantly, advance your technology to animal proof of concept. In parallel, but especially when the POC is complete, you will need to take case or your IP costs for business operations, etc. So you'll need to take care of those. So let's say offices for your team members, transport to conferences, and similar things. And for this, often you cannot get reimbursed from these grants. So you will need some outside cash, and you can get it from some competitions. So in Switzerland specifically, you have, for example, VentureKick, the Vigier, Venture Challenge, and others. It can be very useful for the first time before your equity raise, but it's not always going to be grant money. So sometimes you will get a convertible loan, so not a grant. What this means is that you will be given the money, but you will either have to decide to pay it back at some point, or at your financing stage, when you will sell equity for shares, it will convert automatically into shares. So you don't have to pay it back, but the foundation will get some money back for that. So then you find yourself in a position that you generated some interest among investors, you got some visibility, etc., through these competitions. Now it's time to incorporate and license the IP from the university. So in Bern, Basel, and UZH, we deal with Unitectra as our tech transfer office or TTO. You will need to negotiate with them. What do they get in exchange for an exclusive global license? And there you'll negotiate many terms, but there are some guidelines that are usually followed. And you will also need to incorporate your company. Usually in Switzerland, that will be as an AG, while in Germany, more as a GmbH. And this will give investors basically anonymity, that not everybody can see that they are the funders or they are investors, and you'll be able to issue shares. Then you get to the main part. So, okay, you found your company. Now is the long road of actually developing this asset and other assets, getting investors in, dealing with all the operational tasks, clinical tasks, etc. So you'll need a lot of money for that. And here you can rely mainly on investors, right? So you have different flavors of them. You can start with angel investors. They usually give you less money. They are people that are relatively wealthy. Then you can go to family offices. Those are also wealthy individuals or families that set up their own private fund, and they can invest in different things. There are institutional venture capital companies that generally have multiple limited partners and look for exits in horizons 5 to 7 years. And they're usually looking purely for financial gain. Then you have corporate VCs. So these are companies that have one LP being their mother company, for example, Novartis Venture Fund or M Ventures for Merck. And they invest also primarily in things that are part of business scope and focus of the mother company now or in the future. Then in parallel, you'll also go for grants. For example, the big grants that you can get are still some Inno-Swiss grants like with implementation partner or SID. You have EIC, European grants, at the beginning Pathfinder when you're still not in vivo for a program that is not in vivo ready, let's say. Then translation, when you already gained Pathfinder, you can apply for translation. And then at the end, you have accelerator once you're looking for or starting, for example, your first in human studies. And you also have NIH grants from US, which surprisingly to me, when I learned about that, you don't have to have anything to do with the United States. You can do that from Europe for European purposes. And then let's say at the end, you went through all of this, you are done with development, great data, good traction, now we can exit. So you have two key choices. You have either M&A, do some corporate, or IPO, so initial public offering for selling the shares to the public. And if you made it well, you can exit, let's say, via IPO on NASDAQ or to your local stock exchange like SIX in Switzerland. And then you have corporates, of course, that are the standard suspects. So how much money is the next question? So for grants in Switzerland, what you can target reasonably somewhere between 100K and 1 million, or sometimes slightly more. For competitions, you can bank another 10K on the lower end and up to really 850K. But be aware that it takes time to get them, so don't rely solely on them. It can be a big time burner if you just solely focus on this. Then for your main part, the total financing to get, let's say, to phase 2, you will need 30 to 120 million francs. That really depends on the number of assets. If you're developing a platform, platforms tend to take much more cash. And then for an exit, well, the good one or neutral one will be at least repaying back what was invested before the company. Somewhere above 100 million would be great. Amazing would be somewhere above 1 billion, let's say. So, okay, where am I currently? So at this stage, I got some convertible loans and grants, putting me somewhere over 1 million francs of funding post my PhD. And I would like to say a couple of words. How did I get there? And what I think are some key skills that are important to develop a company, even from a bench at the uni during your PhD to a preclinical company. And here's my path and what I did basically to get to here. I started off at University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, where I come from, doing my Bachelor of Engineering and Master of Science in Industrial Pharmacy. And I wanted to work in pharma initially. So I therefore went to work at Novartis for about 9 months or so, during my studies. And then I wanted to get some international experience. So I went to Basel here at Lonza. So I worked there as an intern and continued as an associate for my thesis. I worked in process development, formulation development, which opened my eyes a bit to understand how a global company does R&D, what are internal processes like, and what is tech transfer and scale up. After that, I went to Bern, where the key thing I gained was really science part, and where I could invent the part of cloud technology. Money didn't come right away, so I went in the meantime while I was writing grants to Amsterdam. I worked there at M Ventures as a fellow, and I worked in investments, had a chance to analyze something over 100 startups coming through the deal flow, and it really changed the way that I looked on entrepreneurship. So that is because you don't know really what gets into it, but then when you speak to a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs, then you realize what it really takes. And it can be a struggle, as Ben Horowitz said. I also learned something about financing and strategy, and that was super useful for writing grants, which then I got. So I got venture fellowship first at the University of Bern. And there I attended a lot of trainings. And that is also due to the help of the ecosystem. I can say the Swiss ecosystem is excellent, supporting you, taking Venture Lab or InnoSwiss courses where you can learn about how to make a business plan, how to negotiate, fundraise, build a team. Very useful. And now that I'm working on the funding of Eldian Biomed, of course, I'm still learning a lot. At this point, it will make sense that I spend a couple of words on Eldian Biomed and what is it we actually do. So the problem that we are trying to tackle is, I tried to tackle during my PhD already, is osteoarthritis. So it's a degenerative disease starting as an injury to the joints that self-propagates, but also causes inflammation. Let me put a pointer here. So it also causes inflammation. So this doesn't only cause pain, but also more damage to the cartilage. So you have this double whammy. And whereas others are trying to either solve the mechanical damage or by lubricating or trying to hit one specific inflammation pathway, this traditionally hasn't really worked out in the clinics. So with Cloudly, we believe that you have to tackle the whole disease at the same time, and we can stop both mechanical and enzymatic damage. So as the disease hits over 500 million patients worldwide, and with aging population, it will continue to grow, particularly in women. It is a large market that we can address. So it will cost over $500 billion very quickly in healthcare costs. So there is a big pain point in the society to pay for it. And indeed, when we ask clinicians, they think that it's a high unmet need. We should first look at moderate knee osteoarthritis as our primary market, and we did our exercise of market sizing, etc. We came up with a number of over $1.4 billion as available, obtainable market for us, which is good when you present to investors because it means that it's a large market to enter. The technology is based on liposomes that we cross-link with anti-inflammatory peptide. at point of care. And from there, it is injected into the knee joint, and cloudy particles then coat the cartilage and form out this mechanical barrier for the mechanical damage. But at the same time, the layer is also anti-inflammatory. So both drivers of the disease progression are addressed at the same time. We filed a patent a day before I finished my PhD in 23 on pharmaceutical composition and the method of use. And we did a lot of testing during my PhD, after my PhD, through heat validation of screening of the linkers, lubrication of cartilage, joint retention, and then lastly, also the preclinical studies in mice. We have some good data from the first studies where we see some improvement in the histology with the lowest doses. We have some improvements in the well-being of the animals and pain, but we are working on building a second model, testing on a complementary model with multiple doses, comparison with standard of care, etc. The team is very important, as somebody also said in the chat, and every investor entrepreneur will tell you that. So I work hard to get a team that can answer all the questions from the investors, basically. On the medical side, I work with Sabine, who worked for 15 years, both at Novartis and Gerresheimer. Dan has had over 17 years of experience in finance and business operations at Celgene and Bluebird. And Liz Marie has worked before in startups and big pharma on CMC. And Evangelos helps us also in the lab. He's, I think, also here. He's a great asset because he had over 7 years of experience with liposomes and formulation. So great to have him. We are completing currently rodent proof of concept. This is a very busy slide, but as I learned, the investors like to have some thoroughness also, not only kind of beauty of the slide, but just to kind of illustrate here where we are, how we think about it. So we need to get a proof of concept done so that we can raise a seed round. After we do that, we can pay for our ship proof of concept to raise a Series A round. And in the meantime, you have the GLP talks that you need to do and the talks, CMC, etc. So not going to stop here too much. Okay, so what are some key challenges that I learned, some key learnings? There's quite a lot of them. If I would like to specify and start somewhere, one challenge that you might face is the pressure to publish your data as soon as it's out. And if you're thinking of making a startup, I would suggest that you resist the urge. If I did it again, I think I would wait until the end of my PhD. That would make the patent even broader. And if the data at the beginning is not promising, doesn't mean that the next batch of data will not be. And if you published already before, some novelty inventiveness might have gone out the window. For the financing of your first proof of concept, so if you don't have internal models in the lab or you have collaborators, I suggest that maybe you look out of Switzerland, abroad. It tends to be very, very cheap compared to Switzerland. So you could do it even with a venture fellowship, for example. And setting up the right team, finding the gaps and black swans is important. And when you understand what you don't know, you can find people that can help you and do all those things. And then you can learn at the right, look for them at the right places, right? Managing more experienced people than yourself. So managing someone with more experience in a field that you don't know much about can be daunting. How do you tell them what to do if you don't know what they should be doing even? So I think the key here is finding entrepreneurial people that will not wait for you to give them a task, but rather come up with it themselves. And then the difference between big pharma people and startup people is more or less in this. So big pharma people are waiting for things to come to them and do them, while startup people will come and do them themselves. Then setting up a business plan here, very short, use a InnoSwiss application as your backbone and go from there. So major grant applications can be very helpful. Then in Switzerland, this is really Swiss specific. You'll need 100K or 50K in the first year for incorporation of the company. While that's crazy, you should find a solution for it. So don't save too much on your salary. Pay yourself a decent salary in this case so that you can come up with it down the road. So, or have a girlfriend with a decent job to lend you some money and find co-founders to pitch in. That's also helpful. Then you'll hear a lot of opinions from all sides on what you should and should not do. Every expert will have a very strong opinion, and you should take it all and be very humble with it. But after some time, you should really form a strong opinion yourself based on this consolidation of these opinions and have a strong opinion about things. This is very important in this job, but is also just as important wearing these strong opinions very loosely. So this means that when you're faced with reality or market's opinion, you should set your ego aside and adapt quickly. Getting the lead investor is key for your fundraising campaign. So here, first thing, start very early, at least 9 months in advance before you need money to build relationships. And then when the data is in, they should be ready to jump on board. So that's one thing. And do competitions to gain visibility. That's why they're also there, and follow up with people very fast. So now for some very general things that I think are good guides. Thinking big in terms of impact and technology is important for someone leading a project. Don't be scared of big ideas and feeling like an imposter. It's okay to start small. It's much better than not starting at all, but be very fast to learn things. Then it's better to be done than perfect. Don't lose yourself in perfectionism, not when writing a grant, not when pitching, not when pushing your first product towards a translation. It will never be perfect, and you might never take the first step if you are a perfectionist here. That doesn't mean you shouldn't put more attention to detail where it matters. So for example, determine where it's important, right? Contracts, term sheets, you should really go in detail there, because those things, once you sign them, they won't change. One can be very sure when, asked what color is the swan, and you reply that it's white, but then you find that somewhere down the road that there are also black swans. So that's called a black swan event. Do research. What are black swans in your space? So what are the things that you don't know, and find mentors that can point you to those. Okay, very briefly, how to get finance. How do VCs look for startups that will get financed? So everybody knows you need to have a good team. That means that they can execute. So have they done it before? What's their track record, etc. Second, is your IP strong? Is it on a matter of composition or only a method of use? That's a big difference. And do you have a freedom to operate? Then the competition, your unique selling proposition. What other players are there in the field, and are you sufficiently differentiated from them? Are they far ahead and better than you? Then you probably will not get financed. Market, so both size and urgency. So are there 5,000 patients globally that can manage the problem with a steroid cream, and then at some point there's no pain? Well, that market probably is not the right one. But if there are, hundreds of thousands of patients and the disease is terminal, that's a very good market probably to enter. Who else is in? So investors really run on FOMO. So if you can create FOMO with investors, it will really play in your advantage. So who else is in is the window for a seed investment closing, and there's a lot of investors already, lined up. You will gain traction with that. And then lastly, if your valuation, your seed round is 100 million with a marginal improvement of a therapy still in preclinics, or perhaps you're too expensive. So that's also what I look at. And lastly, about the process. So let's say that you have things in order, you pitch to a VC, and now you enter the process. So at the beginning of this chain is their deal flow, where they source the startups, who share their deck with them, etc. And then the next step is the due diligence. So here they look into your data to see, okay, what is your tech? Is it legit? Next, they'll look at the market to understand where you are positioned, have your IP checked. So they are not going to trust you, right, on your work usually. You should show it to them and make it simple for them. But at the same time, they're going to do their homework if they are professional investors. The first two filters are usually done with their internal team, associates, analysts, and so on. But then they will bring in their advisory board into it. So that means that when they'll be looking at your clinical, non-clinical data and the plans, they'll have somebody expert in that. When they'll be looking at your IP, they'll have somebody that is expert in IP, for example. Okay, let's say that you pass them the due diligence, you go to the deal structure. So there you will negotiate about the terms. You'll try to set up a syndicate of different investors who will talk about valuation. And you'll be then presented with a term sheet. So the term sheet is non-binding, but at the same time, you should really take it as binding document. So don't accept the term sheet before you're sure about the terms. Really do a homework there to get the right terms done. And then there's an investment. They will be probably part of your board of directors. So you live with them and die with them as a startup. As a bonus slide, I just wanted to say maybe so for some future learning, some books, newsfeed, podcasts, internships that maybe you can do. This is how I learn about these things. So for me, the two books that are excellent in explaining everything that I said and much more in detail are The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. He's a tech founder and turned venture capitalist at A16Z. And his employee at the time when he was an entrepreneur was Scott Cooper. He wrote Secrets of Sand Hill Road, an excellent book if you want to understand venture capital. And then for following the news and, understanding a little bit, maybe what are the trends, what is happening in the field, Endpoints News is probably the best news website there is for biotech. And then there's the fierce section of biotech, pharma, and so on. And for European biotech, there's a very good podcast with a lot of CEOs from European biotech companies and venture capitalists from Philip Hem. It's called Flot.bio show. And I can really recommend it. That's all from my side. I hope it was not too long, and happy to answer any question if there's any, or take it offline from here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gregor. Thank you for your nice presentation. Okay, we have some time for questions. Are there any questions? Okay, then I'll start. I'm very interested in what skill or mindset did you develop since you left academia?
What mindset I developed after leaving academia? I would say that the mindset stayed more or less the same. I really came into my PhD wanting to make impact. This is what drove me from the start. I didn't want to, pursue a lot of publications or so on. I wanted to create something that will, at the end, treat a patient, hopefully. Stayed with me throughout, ventures and coming back here. That's really what, makes me.
So then another question of mine. What advice would you give to yourself to the PhD, Gregor? Would you do something different before you started?
I think I was sometimes thinking too much as trying to fit in academia and trying to, pursue the publications. After, getting some negative data during, the process, everybody is doing their PhDs exposed to their negative data. I didn't know if I'll be able to do it, but I think I would just encourage myself and think still entrepreneurially. Try to get as far as you can during your PhD, because it's much cheaper to do it while you're a PhD student than after you're a PhD student. So, try to get as far as you can into development and publish as late as possible and file the patent as late as possible.
We have a question from the chat from Alan. He's asking, from your experience in these big pharma companies, which are the biggest learning you get, and especially the differences with the academic world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are, of course, major differences. I had a feeling that in industry, the work is much more team-oriented. So in academia, I think you have a group, you have your project, you're responsible for it, you push it together with your professor. But in industry, when there's a problem, it's a team problem, it's a company problem, and people go work on it together. I think that's one aspect. And the second thing is, of course, it's easier to work with a lot of technicians in industry. You don't have to think about every little thing that you need to prepare. It's already prepared, so it makes work easier. And I would say those are the two biggest things for a scientist in industry and academia. But of course, one other thing is, what also made me move from industry at the beginning. You really need to have a PhD if you want to have any impact. And even when you have a PhD at the beginning, you will not have a very big impact. You will still work in a very set system on a small set of things. And that's a different also from a startup. So in a startup, you will have opportunity to have an overview over a lot of different things, from early, R&D to tech transfer to your CDMO, to contracts, to managing the team, to financing, everything. And that's really cool, in my opinion. And to get to that level in big pharma, you will have to reach your 50s, 60s. And, it's a long road before you can do that in a big pharma.
Great. There's one question more in the chat.
I see.
How useful was PharmaChem?
Yeah, I see also the chat now.
Okay.
Feel free to read, sorry.
No worries. How useful was PharmaChem for building your network? Did it have an impact to get the point where you are now? Thank you very much for the talk.
Yeah, I think it was very useful. I think in everything that you do, I was part of, 3-4 different NGOs. And if you're just passive inside, it might not be super useful. But if you are active and you put yourself out there, you will meet people. And of course, I took together with Mariana, who came from my lab, we did, we set it up together, and we were really at the helm, and we could go out and talk to a lot of people to organize events. And still, there are people that run this forward, Carlos and others. And, if you are engaged and you are motivated, you will have more responsibility and you will have more exposure to outside people, and make it your own, right? And you can decide, okay, I really want to have on PharmaCamp or at another event, whatever you're organizing, right? This kind of profile. And then you find, I don't know, somebody at Roche. Okay, this person is super high up, has a really cool CV. I want to talk to him. And you write to him, hey, are you interested in speaking at PharmaCamp, for example? And that can really give you an in with people that you want to reach out, but otherwise you wouldn't have a reason to contact and they might not reply. It gives you a reason to write to them. And that is a really cool way and a very smooth way to do it, I think. So I think it's very good. And maybe I should say, whenever you do something, be active, be, proactive, and think about what you can achieve with it. And then you will get exposure.
There's one more question in the chat. When first during your career did you start thinking about the idea of a startup?
I thought about it during my master's probably already, but then I set it aside a little bit. When I started my PhD, I always wanted to get a project that is of a translational nature. I think drug delivery in general, so for CRS people, a lot of you probably work in drug delivery. Our field is super applicative, right? So it's very translational. You basically are developing something that should solve a problem. It's not basic science, right? So you can think of it quite easily as a startup if you think of it. If you're doing basic science, you might not be in the position always to do it. Of course, if you do find a new target, something that can be very impactful and great to do a startup. But in drug delivery, it's a very applicative field. And I think that while you're doing your PhD or a postdoc or whatever, it's never too late, right? I think it's good to consider, is this something that could solve a real problem on the market? Are we better than others? Can we make it better than others are doing? If so, do I have, what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Do I have patience? Do I have the drive? And if so, go for it, right? I think that was my mentality. Kim?
Yeah, I'll jump myself. So thank you. Actually, there was a question in the chat as well, but apparently it was only sent to me. So maybe I will start reading that question. So Thordis was asking, where can you look for co-founders? And then I had another question myself.
That's a very good point. Sure, I can start with that one first, maybe, but that's a very good question with which I was, dealing a lot. I think the co-founder should be kind of natural. So if you have somebody in the lab, right, and you have a little bit complementary skills, I don't know, you're a drug delivery guy and another one is maybe coming from more preclinical side, like let's say they work a lot with animal models or something like that, they're a little bit more disease oriented. That's already a good pairing. And because what it will mean, you are both young, you will both have a lot of skin in the game, probably, if you're co-founders. You don't have a mortgage on the house, maybe somewhere, right? You don't have another fancy job that, you have to put a big commitment to leave, right? You will be very in it. So that's a good co-founder, I think. At the same time, if there's no natural fit in the lab, then you have to look outside. And where I looked at what problems did I have. So my technology, you could a little bit spin it as a maybe medical device because it has a physical mode of action, or a drug. I wasn't sure. So I went on conferences that, were for free for me through some university. It's called MedTech Pharma Platform. And I met a lot of people from regulatory affairs and medical fields that, I was asking, what is your opinion? What should I be classified as, and so on. So it was a real pain that I had at the time, and meaning that I needed solution for this fast, and I didn't know how to answer. So I went there, found some people that could answer these questions, and I met Sabine, and she was super proactive. She came to me, suggested some solutions, suggested a follow-up, and so on. She got really interested into the technology, into the company. And, she was and is willing to work for free for already a lot of time, which gives you an indication, okay, this person is really driven, wants to do it. Plus, you see from the work together that you are doing for free that, it is a compatible skill set too. It's complementary. I don't know anything about clinical things, right? So it was a really good fit. And because of that, I think I think it's a good candidate, right? So you would go find people based on the things that you need. You need to have somebody that is a little bit more clinical expert, or maybe, on this side, somebody that has science background. So you find platforms where you can find them. So conferences are a good way. You can also find them on some workshops organized by InnoSwiss, for example, or whatever the German alternative is, I think called ZIT. So there are workshops where you can meet people. That's my 2 cents.
Good. I wanted to ask actually a question. I'm not sure if there is another question in the chat. So maybe feel free to Nestle to ask the other question first, and I will be myself at the end. So
sure. So the next question is: you talked about already. Starting in your PhD is a crucial part. Is this always possible? And what should you do if the group leader is not supportive? Did you select a group for the PhD depending on their support? Are they willing to give?
So if I understand correctly, the question is if it's always possible to do the startup from your PhD, and if the group leader is not supportive. Yeah, I mean, it's not always possible. No, of course not. You should have a supportive PI that will give you the freedom to do it. As I said, sometimes you have a PI that actually wants it more than an entrepreneur or a person in their lab. I've seen cases where the PI has some patent or some technology developed, a lot of data, and they want to make a startup, but they don't want to leave their professorship because, of course, not it's super comfortable, high paying, and it's a job for life. So you don't want to go out of that. So you need to find people that will do it for you, and you find then entrepreneurial people in your new group. That's one way you can do it, but the other way is that you are pushing for it a lot, right? And the PI should, allow you to do it, because without them, the tech transfer office might not be interested in filing a patent for you as well. And if the PI gives you a lot of roadblocks, it's going to be tough. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering that question completely. Did I miss some part? Maybe about the support that they can give. Usually the support is not super operational, right? They can be your advisor, but they can provide you, for example, with access to their laboratory, right? And host you in the group. So that's very valuable, because if you want to set up your own lab, it gets very expensive. So you will need to raise more money if you need to set up your lab, because of the things that you think are super basic, trivial, like having a vortex, having a hood, having ventilation. All of those things cost money. So you need to buy them from scratch. and it takes time. So you don't want to lose time. You want to be as fast as possible. And, leaning on your lab to get some crucial data out is important. And then usually they would stay at the company as an advisor, let's say, and, have some advisory shares. But it really varies case to case. So there's all colors that I've encountered of other entrepreneurs and their experiences with PIs.
Kim, do you want to ask a question, or shall I read the question in the chat? Okay, I just continue with the question on the chat. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how much would you say luck matters in this long process?
A lot, but I think there's a saying in Slovene, how do I translate it? The luck goes with the brave, something like that. So if you don't do anything, no luck will help you. So you will only be able to get lucky if you do something and, make a plan and execute. And, when you actually put in effort and you all of the things that I talked about before, then you also will need luck. But without that, no amount of luck will help you. And it's also one thing that I could mention here. That's where the team comes in. You can have a great idea and whatever, but you will need to have, because when the things go bad, even though your technology might not work, but even if the technology might not work, if you have a good team and you find a way to pivot, you might still have a great company at the end of the day. And people at the end of that road might see that as luck, but actually it's not luck. It's hard work and inventiveness of the team. So I'm not saying that luck is not a factor; it's a huge factor, but some of it can mask itself as luck.
Kim?
Yeah. So it's sorry, my connection now is dropping. Hello? Okay, now.
Yeah.
So it's actually, indeed, it's a nice saying, right? Like, I mean, you cannot look for luck, but you can try, right? Like at least to direct yourself and to try to take some action. And then if you don't do anything, for sure, luck will not be on your side. I wanted to ask a bit like more, not really philosophical, but more in the sense of, okay, you studied, right? And you have a path, but you learn a lot on the path. And you're not born knowing everything. And definitely we coming from academia or PhD, we typically are not that much involved into that startup or tech transfer. So I was wondering how, if now looking at yourself now, if there is one advice, I know you have given some take home message, right? But one advice you would give to people that are starting master or a PhD and have already this idea in mind, which advice would you give? Like to that, hey, make sure you take that into account if you want to eventually have a startup.
I think there are people that are very good in going very deep into a topic, and they are, excellent. They will know, you give them a challenge and they will go into that challenge to the end and they'll know everything about it. And there are people that are a little bit more like me that are, looking at the things from very high up perspective and, let's say, a jack of all trades, master of none, although I hope that I am close to mastery at least some of the things. And I think, as a, let's say, CEO, you will have to have an overview of a lot of things, right? So having an overview and knowing something about everything, although not too in depth, right? As a young person, finishing your master's would be a very good way to go. So learning a lot of broadness, right? And for that, for example, doing some internships after your master's is very useful, just to see how the thinking process is outside of academia, right? Because if you just go into your PhD and then from your PhD you go directly to start, you will not have, you will not know what is going on outside of the university, right? So either going for big pharma or a startup, both of it is fine. Just that you go out of university and you see how people work outside of there. I think it's very useful. So I would say, do some internships before you maybe start your PhD, or if you already are doing your PhD, maybe, okay, if you're developing something during your PhD, you want to do it as soon as possible, right? The technology, you don't want to lose time. But if you were in the case like me, I think it was super useful to go outside of, academia and go to venture capital, for example, because it did open, my mind in a different way than if I just stayed at the university, I think. So trying to get, as versatile skills as possible while you're pursuing one topic, right? During your PhD, or anyways, becoming very specialized in one topic. So, I don't know, you're doing drug delivery for central nervous system, right? So you are going to be expert in that field, but build something around that, right? Or through NGOs like, I don't know, PharmaCamp or whatever, or CRS, like a very good platform as well, right? So get some breadth of experience.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thanks for the questions. And also thank you, Gregor.